Okay, today we're going to create a login component in vue.js 2. We're going to utilize Bootstrap 3 for the framework, CSS framework, and that'll allow us both a quick framework system, but more importantly, anything that you create in Bootstrap 3 then can use this component. Um, it's a good idea to go ahead and set these components if you're basing them on a framework, is just kind of collect them, and maybe you'll have a framework that uses Bootstrap 3 as the CSS, or Foundation, or maybe Material Design Lite, or maybe Pure. No matter which one you do, once you create the first one and go through all the logic, then you just have to figure out how each CSS framework may deal with the validation, the visual response in validation of forms. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and create our project. So we're over here. I'm using WebStorm. Um, for my IDE. It's a great integrated IDE for doing a number of things, including having my terminal right here built into my IDE, which is nice, especially if you're on Windows. On Macintosh, it's obviously easier on a Mac with the terminal, that is. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I've already created my project in WebStorm. So we've already got our folder. So when I initialize, I won't actually include the package name uh, because the folder already exists. So let's go ahead and go. If you need the basic startup on this, I've got a tutorial right before this one that is how to get to the point of having a blank project, and it's the same that we would go from here. So we're going to do vue init webpack, and I'm not using any package name. So it's going to ask me if I want it in the current folder. It's going to give me project name, description, author, and then the compiler, and the vue-router, and no, I don't want linting, no testing for unit testing, no testing for end-to-end testing. So those questions were basically, I could have answered yes to all of them, except that or accepted the defaults, except that I don't want ESLint in there for the purpose of tutorials, because it stops the compilation process and says, hey, you put a semicolon in the wrong spot. I have started using ESLint, and I have reset my browser to use the JavaScript standard coding syntax. So my WebStorm doesn't actually show, hey, you need a semicolon here and here, because ESLint doesn't want any semicolons, at least in the standard version of it. All right, so we've got our program. Let's go ahead and npm install. And I'll go ahead and look at my scaffolding. Because I have it in this particular program, if you notice, I can show my npm scripts. That allows me to run my developer and run my builds from the interface of my WebStorm IDE, instead of having to type them in the terminal of my IDE. Okay, so we should have a running version. Let's make sure that comes up, and it doesn't, because I have another one running in a different place. All right, so we'll shut that one down. Let's give that another shot. Can't run two web servers on the same port on the same computer, obviously, because it creates port conflict. Okay, so we've got our basic app. I'm going to hit inspect so that we don't have to worry about caching, the browser caching, and not updating the page when we refresh. We've got, of course, our favicon, which didn't load. We can refresh the page. That'll go away because that only shows up once. We've got the Vue dev tools for use here. So we're good to go. If any of this doesn't look familiar or it seems that I've jumped ahead, just go back to one of my previous videos on how to install and set up your project. It will cover all of that because this one is strictly on creating a component, and there's going to be things like Bootstrap, which I don't really cover, even though I will in this particular case for each item. Obviously there are some um, there are going to be some concepts here that aren't covered because they're intermediate level concepts. So if I get confusing at any point in time, just back up to one of the other ones, one of the other tutorials, or go view a tutorial on the basics of Vue. There's lots of them, and there's some good ones. I'll put them. I'll put my favorite one in the description of this on covering the real nitty gritty of how to get started in the Vue language. There's a really good one out there, and I'll put it down in the link. Let's see now. We're going to our source. We're going to open all this stuff up. What we've got to start with is our main, our app, and we're using the router to get to the hello.vue component, which is this right here. That's the hello view component. If we open that, you can see that's where that is. The image, the PNG image, is actually an asset here called logo PNG, and they locate it right there in our app file. It's this image right here. And then they put the router in, which routes our components. So with all that said, let's go ahead and start cleaning this out so that we can start creating our component. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just strip out the image. I'm going to strip out the CSS from our app. So we can refresh that, and you can see that we've lost our CSS and we've eliminated the image. We want to also look at our index file real quick. This is really where we should have started. We're going to do the index file because we need to bring in our Bootstrap. So we're going to look at Bootstrap right here, and in getting started, we want to bring in our latest minified on our CSS. So here's our Bootstrap CSS. That goes in our head section. All right. Oh, that's just, I missed the link. There we go. Copy. It's a long one. There we go. All right, so now we've got our Bootstrap CSS in. We're going to need our Bootstrap JavaScript in, which goes at the body bottom right there. All right, now Bootstrap needs jQuery to run. So let's see if we've got one here. In their sample outline, they show how to set it up, but they import their Bootstrap CSS and JS file into a local file, and then so we'd have to download it, put it in a folder, and use it. I'd rather just use the CDN, certainly for a tutorial, and even in production sometimes, because the CDNs get cached on browsers, and many times it's a much faster way to load. Okay, so here's our jQuery, and for Bootstrap 3, we're using one of the older jQueries because that's how it was designed, so that we know that we don't have any compatibility issues with Bootstrap 3. Bootstrap 4 actually uses the new slim version of jQuery, which is a modified version. We're not getting into Bootstrap 4 because it's been in alpha for 2 years now. It's still got to get to beta and then a release candidate. So it's not coming anytime soon. I can almost promise you that. So we need the jQuery before the Bootstrap JS. So we'll put that in. And what did I miss that's causing? I missed the end script because it was on a different line. There we go. All right. And that gets us Bootstrap. Let's just make sure we haven't missed anything. Bootstrap. Let's go ahead and grab this viewport. My WebStorm, for some reason, doesn't start with that. I could have shown you a quick. So we copied these two meta tags up here. That gives us the XUAA compatibility and gives us our responsive viewport scaling that's needed to allow for responsive design. Okay, so our HTML file, our index.html file is all created and we're ready to go with that. We don't have to mess with that anymore. We've still got the ID of app where our entire application is going to manifest. So we can close that. We've got our app.view file ready to go. We've set up for our router. Our router is currently showing our Hello View application component. And there's nothing. I tell you what I want to do. I want to add, if I can go look over here, I want to add some padding. And actually, I'll wait to do that. We'll come back to that. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's go to our hello. So we're going to strip out all the stuff we don't need in our hello app. We don't need a message. And we don't need any styling, because we're going to be building our components ourselves. All right, so this is our hello app. And if we look at our Bootstrap project, we can refresh that. We've got a nice, clean, empty Bootstrap project ready to go. We've added Bootstrap to the HTML. You can also import Bootstrap through the NPM. This is just simpler for me. And since Bootstrap and the Bootstrap JS and jQuery don't interfere with the Vue hierarchy, then we don't really have to go through a lot of trouble in setting that up. We can just bring it in as standard links and scripts. All right, so we've got that. Let's go ahead and create our login component, because we want to create this as a component while it's actually being used as a component. So we're going to create our login component. And we're going to template out our login component, and I have a live script to do that. I set it up as VU and then hit tab, and it auto-fills that out. You're going to have to obviously type this out, so pause your screen and type it out if you're following along, or get it from the GitHub. Okay, so from here, we can rename our name because we want it to show up properly. I'm going to show you. Let's go ahead and link this in. Let's go to the hello view, and we're going to bring in our login component. So we're going to do login. Here, let's bring it in first, and our IDE will actually assist us in doing this. So if we import login component from, we need a dot / for local files. Login. I put that in the wrong spot. Apologies. It cannot go inside the object. The object is going to use it. So we need login. There we go. Login component. There we go. Now we've got it imported. Let's go ahead and bring it into our sure So we need the components. Almost everything is plural after the initial one, it seems. Okay, and then we're just going to bring in login component is the login component. There we go. Now once we've done that, we should be able to save. Still no errors. So now we can do login, and that's why I was saying I kind of wanted to switch that up so I could show you how WebStorm with the Vue plugin allows you to it helps you along as you go, which is nice. All right, so now we've got our component in our hello component, so we're 2 levels in, from our app, which is a component, but it's our primary visual source of the component, and then of course main being the starting point of all of this. So we've got, so let's go ahead and just start building our login component. And I am going to go ahead and, yeah, let's just go ahead and start doing it by hand. You can skip forward. I'll put a marker in here so you don't have to watch me type out an entire set of Bootstrap classes. But I'd like to talk to them as I go through them, so that it's not one of those things where somebody's creating a tutorial and putting in a whole bunch of classes that control the interface, and then talk every once in a while about the mechanics of Vue, but not talk about everything around it, because it gets confusing. It's like I've watched a number of videos to where I'm like, well, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Well, if you're going to do it in Bootstrap, or if you're going to do it in Material Design Lite, or you're going to do it in Pure or Foundation, at least show me why you're doing it. Don't just sit there and type and ignore me. So I like doing it the long and hard way. Of course, it makes long videos. So I'll put a marker so that you can jump to the next thing after it's scaffolded out. But let's go ahead and put a container, and that is Bootstrap. It gives us a container. We'll kind of just save as we go along as it starts to show up. We're going to go ahead and give us a panel, div class of panel. And we're going to do a panel dash primary. And what that does is it gives us you have a number of choices. The normal panel would be default, which gives it a gray top. I like the primary because it gives it a nice little blue top. And I'll show you that here in a second when we hit our panel primary. So it's actually showing up. It's just shoved up against the top, and it doesn't have anything in it. So let's do div, and we'll do panel heading. Now, if you don't know what I just did, I'm doing Emmet, which is a shorthand for writing out your HTML. So you'll notice when I hit tab, that'll turn into a set of div tags with the class already instantiated with panel heading in it, just like that. All right, so on our panel heading, we're going to do another div. This is the problem with with Bootstrap and many of these guys is there's so many divs. I'm sorry, I'm not doing another div. You get lost in the divs. So we're going to do an H3 for our heading title, and it's going to be called panel title. And all of these panels that you're seeing in the classes, if you go to Bootstrap, getting Bootstrap, you'll find it in the components aspect here. And I need to bring that out a little bit here so we can get that. There we go. Panels right here. So it's going to show you, how to set up your panel with different examples. And this is the one I'm going for, is the blue panel. But you can set it up as primary, success, info, warnings, danger, etc. So let's go ahead and move this out of the way again so we can start working. All right, so we've got our H3 with a panel title, and we're going to call this login. And I'm getting emails. Imagine that. all the time. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and create the body of this. And let's go ahead and we should have, there we go. Excuse me, ignore that. Control save on this side. So now we've got the panel and the panel title, but we have no panel body. So let's go ahead and create the panel body. All right. We're going to do a form. And we're going to do a div class of form group. I'm doing these kind of longhand because I've got a template over on my other side that allows me not to get completely lost. But it's the completed version. So So we're creating a label. Okay, so let's go on from here. We've created the panel body. Then we created a form group. So this is going to be our form for our input. Then we're creating a label and an input. And the reason that we create a label, even though we're going to hide it, is that screen readers read the text of your label to tell a person who's using a screen reader what the text box that just got focused is. So if we do a label for the email, because we're just going to do two things, we're going to do an email and a password. So let's see here. We do a class, and we're going to do control label. And we're doing two classes. This next one, the sr-only only says screen reader only, which means that it will only show up or it will only be used, because I haven't actually used these with the screen reader to see how they act. It'll only be implemented if there's a screen reader involved. So with that in mind, nobody's going to see that unless it's spoken to them as a screen reader. So instead of just putting email with a colon behind it like you would a normal label, we may want to put something like add your email address, period. That way, when what did I mess up here? What is it not like? Oh, it's still looking pretty well. Anyway, sorry, I get distracted easy when I'm doing these, when I'm thinking forward. So when we're using a screen reader, basically make it something comprehensive so that when it's read to them, when they enter the input field coming next, that it has some verbal meaning instead of just symbolized, such as email colon. We see that, we know what that is, but for somebody who the computer's speaking to, they probably know it because that's how most labeling systems are. But it's no skin off our back to make it a little easier on somebody who's using a screen reader. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our input. We're going to do a type of email. We're going to do, obviously, classes. Let's see. We're going to do a form control. Now, all of these classes are, every one of them I've used so far is part of Bootstrap. So make sure that if you don't understand anything, I'm not using any external classes that I've hidden somewhere in a styles.css file. This is all Bootstrap classing. All right. We need an ID, so we can clear up that red email up there because the label is saying it's for an input of ID email. All right. Also, when you're doing inputs, use standardized words for the input you're using so that browsers like Chrome and Firefox can auto input your stored location, your stored information. So if the If the input is of type email or even of type text, but its ID is email, the browser will automatically autofill those out for the users based on the fact of how they've used their email in the past. So those standardizations are super nice for your end user. Um, and all you have to do is make sure that you follow, email, password, first name, last name, and there's a list on the internet of how you can normalize all those, and that way every single time somebody jumps into it, when they do address, city, state, it'll all autofill based on stuff they've done in the past, and your users will certainly appreciate not having to type all that out. Okay. Placeholder. Because we're not having because we won't have a label, obviously, we need a placeholder. All right. Well, let's go ahead and, and bring that up. That was a lot of talking for one input. Okay, so now we've got our email, and we just need to create another form group because each of these is a form group in Bootstrap. So we're just going to do div.form group tab. That's that Emmet. We can do label, and Emmet will automatically do our for us. So I can do password, enter, and let's see, we're going to do the same thing we did on the last one. We really could have copied the last one. Probably would have made it a little quicker. Control label and SR only. And of course, you can go straight to Bootstrap and take their examples and copy them. And it's probably even quicker than hand typing it. But it's good too, so that you get that mental see, do, touch remembrance association. All right, so add your password. And that will help the screen readers identify. Don't hit keys while you're going. All right. Okay. Now we have our input for our password. The type is password. Class is form control. And this just gives that class gives the input box the particular look that it has when you add that form control class. Its ID is going to be password, so we can associate the label. You notice our red went away. We're going to have a placeholder, and it's going to be password. If you don't include a label, any SR screen readers will use your placeholder as the verbal command that comes out of the computer. And obviously, email and password are probably something that they would understand without any problem. But again, it's nice to include that label even if you don't show it, because it's just it doesn't cost you very much, and it's just nice to do for the people that have to use screen readers. Okay, so now we've got our email, we've got our password, we've got our login component issue. Remember, we're building the component. Hello World is using the component right now. We're not passing any props or emitting any events, because we're just scaffolding out our component in Bootstrap and getting the way we want it to look. Okay, so we need to go ahead and let's just go ahead and add our button real quick. Yeah, so we're going to do a button, and its class is going to be button. And remember, these are all Bootstrap classes. I'm not using any classes that are from anywhere else. And we're going to call it sign in. And let's talk about that real quick. The pull right is a Bootstrap function to float it and pull it to the right-hand side. Button and button, if we did button default, which is the default, um, if it will update, did we save? Button default. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure why that's showing that. Let's try a different one. Let's try another one. Do I have something wrong? Button class, button default, pull right. I don't know why it didn't change. That's your default button, the gray button. I guess we just had a little caching glitch. I knew that wasn't supposed to look that way. Anyway, so that would be your default button. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm partial to the blue primary color. There we go. That's how it should have worked. So now we have a button that's obviously going to refresh our page because we don't have any way to stop the form from refreshing. We've got our email address, we've got our password inputs, and we are ready to now start creating validation to ensure that we're not sending garbage out of our component. First thing I want to do, and this is what I was going to do earlier in the app view, is I want to go ahead and add some padding so that we're not tucked up on the top of that. We don't want to add that to the component. We want to make sure the component is, not margined out anyway. It's got a zero margin, which it basically does, except the container is bringing us in slightly. But we want that to all be handled by its parent or cascaded down from its parent, depending. So we're going to do it in our app, which is 2 components up. We can trickle down from our app to our hello to our login component. So let's do padding. Well, let's do we're in the app. Bring that out so it's a little bit more readable. We're in the app, obviously, ID. So we're going to put padding on the app, which includes our router view, which includes hello, which includes our component, our additional component. If that's confusing, I'm sorry. It's just the way that components work in a tree. Okay, so padding, top, and let's just make it 200 pixels because we just want it down. There we go. More like where a one would sit. Let's bring that up just slightly, I guess. It's a little weird being that low. All right. So that's all we need with our app view. And the only 2 views we're going to be working out of here now is going to be the hello and the login component. So at this point, let me look at something real quick. Excuse me, I have screens everywhere. It's makes life wonderful, but it may look weird on camera. Okay, so let's bring this down a little bit. Over here, we can squish this out and bring this over a little bit, just to give us a little bit more room. Because we're going to start writing some long attributes on our elements, just for the fact that we're going to have to do feedback and add the classes that add, the green colors or the red colors, add check marks and X's to our input boxes. So at this point, let's go ahead and look at let's go ahead and create our submit. So we're doing a form at submit dot prevent, and then we're going to give it a method to go to. So we're going to do submit login. Now what we've done here is we've basically given our button, which is defaulted as a submit button. We could also put in type submit, but that would be redundant. All buttons that are not typecasted to anything will be a submit button. So we click the sign in button, the form submits the form, but in this case we want Vue to prevent it from submitting and go ahead and send it to our shown method. So we're going to come down here and we're going to go ahead and add a method. Let me, I've got the wrong tab lining in here, so I'm going to do that. If I hit Control Alt and L on my keyboard, it cleans up my indentation coding, and it should be at 2 space tab sets. I used to use 4 space, but as we start doing these tutorials, we need more horizontal usable area. And I think that linting, the ESLint likes the 2 space standard as opposed to the 4 space standard. So in the need of conforming, God help us. Anyway, let's move on. So we've done that. We need to add, back up, there we go, methods. And we're going to do our, what do we submit? Login method. And we're just going to leave that blank. Now, if you're linting, you can't leave that blank. You have to put something there. So we'll go ahead and do our login method. Now, ESLint would accept that. Or you can bring your bracket up and close it here. But then I don't really like that. I like that bracket up top, bracket down below with the space, so I can see that, hey, this is where you're going to be working at some point. But to-dos work too, real well too, because now I can look at my to-do list in WebStorm and go to all my different to-dos that I may set up. Okay. All right. So we've got the sign-in. We've created our method for the login. We haven't filled it because there's going to be a lot of stuff that needs to go in there for emitting properties and events. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on. So next thing we're going to do is we've got our form, we've got our div. Let's go ahead for the divs. What we need in our classes is we're going to start doing the visual aspect of the feedback and whether we show success or error. So we do has feedback, allows that if our input fails validation, then it will go through the Bootstrap JavaScript and work its magic to add the color classes as needed in the Bootstrap framework. So we need has feedback to allow it to dynamically feedback, and we need an error for that form group. Excuse me, we need feedback. It could be success, it could be warning. If we look at the components, and you'll see we'll get either green, blue, yellow, or red, depending on which ones you use. You have success, info, warning, and danger. In feedback, it would be error, but the warning, info, and success stay the same. So let's look at that real quick in our little project. And if we put in has error, we'll see that we get the red around the input box. If it has success, it puts the green around the input box. So that's going to be our form validation. And I've always appreciated a system that basically, as you type, it turns red, green, um, as it feels that that's right. Now, email in Bootstrap is a little bit strange. Actually, email as a validation system is a little strange because I've actually never seen it. But apparently, an email can can exist without the dot whatever extension. So technically, if I were to write Robert at email, that's actually a viable email address. Spell it right too. That's actually a viable email address, and we'll see that in the validation aspect of it. Once I hit a dot, that's not valid anymore. It needs the extension, whether it's .net, .com, .biz, .whatever you may have as an email extension or whoever's using it. So we'll see it bounce, and it's kind of interesting. We'll also need password validation. So let's go ahead and on the password input form group, we'll do has feedback and has success. All right, so now we've got our two greens and both show valid sources. Of course, that's not how we're going to run it, but that's an example of how we do the validation has error. If they'll update fast enough. I wonder. Div class has error. Just not very responsive. Our may have too many things running on the browser. Something's interfering and slowing us down. But anyway, there we go. We've got one that's validated and one that's showing an error in the validation. Okay. Let's talk real quick about validating our password. Well, actually, let's go ahead and jump into the email because there's two things we want to add to that. We're going to do autofocus, and that means that anytime the page refreshes, our cursor will automatically end up with the in that input box, which is what we want for a login box. So we've set the autofocus for the first input, and then we're going to make sure it's required because nobody's going to log in with a blank email address. Okay. And then, of course, our password will also need to be required. Goodness. There we go. But our password's going to want more validation than just existing. If we put in our email, Robert at email, like I said, that actually is valid. Then our password doesn't want to be something like, oh, I can put in a 1. Hey, guess what? I just passed validation. So what we've got is we've got pattern validation. And the easiest one to do as far as pattern validation is simply to put in a pattern. Oops, pattern. And it's going to be a regular expression. So let's do dot 2 and 6. That regular expression says a minimum of 2 characters, a maximum of 6 characters. So it will not be valid. Make sure that's done. We're going to refresh. It will not be valid until at least 2 characters are in. So 2 is functional. And of course, if we add more than 6, 6 works, 7 doesn't. All right. Now, obviously, if you're going to do a pattern matching system, you need to let the customer know what the pattern matching system is. Because that would be, well, rude. Let's see. So we're going to want, where are we putting our pattern matching system? Right there. Okay. So we're going to put it inside, obviously, our group because it's part of that. So we're going to do small, and small is just, I just kind of like the way that it looks. And we're going to go password help span. And actually, the reason I call it password help span is because that's what it came from the Bootstrap as showing as when you're putting additional information. So if we were hard coding this, we could just do let's see, password length min to max 6. Obviously, you'd want to write that a little nicer. Okay, so that gives us our information on our pattern matching for our password. And realize that you can do any type of pattern matching you want. Any regular expression will work. So, you could do pattern matching on your email and not set it to email, but we're going to go ahead and let the operating systems, the browsers, take care of that particular pattern matching. They've probably thought of something or gone through the testing that we can't go through. But pattern matching can do credit cards. It can do social security numbers. It can do the way that names are put out. As a matter of fact, it can even pull stuff out of a long string and return just little pieces and parts, as we're going to learn at some point in the future. But for right now, we're going to use simple pattern matching just to show min-max. Okay, so now, and the pattern in that in input, if it doesn't meet it, will cause a validation error on the form. That's one of the reasons that our buttons don't call methods directly. We want that validation, the form, to validate our form, right? So we want the form item wrapper to validate our form, and if we put the method directly into the button to call a method, then we would have to validate that method, validate our form by hand, every part of it in the actual method, separately from letting the form take care of some of our validation. And just even if it's just having them all set as required that need to be required, saves you a lot of typing if you're doing hand validation and you're checking to see if the box is empty, because you'd have to do it for every box, or at least run a looping script to loop through all of them. Anyway, so at this point, we've got our basic layout, we've got static validation, and what I want to go ahead and do now is I'm going to go ahead and add some checkboxes into our validation, and they'll show you how to do that on the Bootstrap page. So we're going to do a span with a class set of, so we're going to be using our glyph icons. Glyph icon, we're going to do a glyph icon dash OK. And form control, and again, this is all copied over from Bootstrap. Okay. And that's it. So now we've got our check mark. Um, and then we can do the same thing for our input. Hold on just a second. Right here where we do the password help span, I need to add an area or area. I'm going to do it back here because we'll only use it this once. This is again where we're looking at, we're going to do an area description or described by and set that to the password help span here ID. Again, that is for screen readers. And it might seem superfluous. It might seem silly to add all that in right now, but if I'm going to do a component and you guys are going to follow through, let's do the whole thing. Let's make one that's usable. Let's make one that is functional ready. Let's make one that's friendly to your screen readers, friendly to all that stuff. So obviously, if they hit the password and somebody has a screen reader, they're going to need to know also that it's a password length minimum of 2/max6. So remember that when you're writing your messages, that a screen reader is going to read that exactly as it's written. And be kind to those people because so many coders don't think about it or don't care. Now, if you're writing it for yourself and never ever going to see the light of day, other than maybe in your office or for yourself or for your family, then yeah, you can skip some of this stuff, but I shouldn't teach it that way. Okay, so that's why we jumped in and did the area described by, and we set that by to the ID of the small text that we're going to put up underneath it. Okay, so yes, so now we're putting in our span. We want our class, and we're going to do the same thing. Glyph icon, remove, form control dash feedback. Again, these are all basically copied from Bootstrap, but the glyph icon remove gives us the X, which shows up like that, which kind of is also, I mean, basically representing the circle that says no, like no, that's not right. But those are the type of um, validation forms that I really like. And like I said, I like to be able to type them and have the validation happen while I'm typing. Um, and obviously, that feedback helps a lot. Okay, and creates an interactive system that's just better than typing into a static form. Okay, let's see what do we need to cover now. Scaffold that. Set the component response width. There we go. Okay, so right now we've got a width problem. We don't want our login panel to be as wide as a 4K screen. So using Bootstrap's grid system, we're going to ensure that it basically stays the same under different widths or screen sizes. So to do that, we're going to have to put it into a grid row and then control the column widths. And Bootstrap allows us to do that. If we're looking at the Bootstrap web page, let's go ahead and expand this so we get rid of our, come on, there we go. More, there we go. We want the CSS under grid systems. Now you can read about how the grid systems work, and basically, here are your grid system breaks for your media breaks, and you've got 4 basically. You've got extra small, small, medium, and large, and it's gridded out into a 12 grid system because 12 is divisible by so many different numbers, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and that's really, that's really it as far as its division factor, and of course the number itself. Uh, but you can see that our grid system allows to move stuff around in the grid system. It can take up, if we do a real quick tutorial on that, let's say I want to take up 2 grids out of 12. That means it sits in 2 grids out of the space of 12 total, which gives you a 6 grid space. In this particular case, they're showing, oh, well, let's put it in 4 spaces and then another component in 4 spaces and then another component in the 4 spaces, totaling 12. And then, so we'll go through this and I'll show you. If you did it in 6 spaces, then you've taken up half the screen because there's a total of 12. It's really neat. It's really nice. And then what they do is they set it up so that you use the terms SX for XS for extra small, SM for small, MD for medium, and then LG for large. So what you do is then you set it that as the screen changes, if it's in a mobile phone, the SX will apply. If that gets larger, say to a tablet, then maybe SM will apply. And larger still, like a laptop, would switch to medium, and then larger than a laptop or a desktop would then go to large. And these can have different effects. You can make it change. And we're going to show you that right here because we're going to use it. Okay, so in our container, we're going to want a row, div.row, and it's classed out as a row. I'm going to go ahead and grab that and just move it down here. We don't care where it is right now because I'm just going to shove it in. I'll show you a trick here. All right, because we're just doing divs. We're going to do a div. Div. Let's write this out longhand because I don't want to do emit. Div class. Let's go ahead and move this down here because I want to see it. I want to show you how it works in real time. All right, now I'm going to do Control Alt L, and that again sets all my divs and everything. When you get using Bootstrap, a lot of times you'll want to put in markers that's like, end panel, and then end, your columns, end row, and because there's so many div nesting, so much div nesting in Bootstrap that it's a little bit of a pain to figure out where you are sometimes on the bottom of the list. Okay, so we've done our row. Now we're going to do our columns, and really we're going to start with column extra small, and we're going to make sure that it's 10 wide, 10 out of the 12, giving us a little space. And here's a tricker that you won't well, here, column. So column XS offset dot 1. So we're trying to equal a total of 12, right? So what we're doing is we're saying we want our component to take up 10 of the slots. We're going to want to offset it by 1 slot. So if we're offset by 1, then have 10, that's 11. There's a total of 12, which gives us a 1 on the other side. Kind of get it? So our offset is going to be moving over from the left X number of spaces. So we'll divide what's left of what we want into 2, and that's our offset. Hopefully that made sense. So we're looking at you'll see that changed. Now when our screen is tiny, unfortunately, it's not realistic, but it just will never get that tiny. So let's bring that out and start looking at that. Okay, and I'm going to bring in, we've got our phone here, and we're going to look at a mobile. So that's basically as small as that will ever get in width. We could make that 12 and eliminate the offset, but I'll show you why we don't. XS 12, and I guess it's just going to take its sweet time. There we go. So that's our 12. That's it's taking up the entire width of the usable screen, minus the slight amount of padding that the container provides us on each side. But if we're looking at its max width in small, column, small, and we say, well, we don't want it larger than 6, right? Because we want 6 with an offset of 3 and an offset of 3, totaling 12. So we can do column, small, offset, 3. So you notice that these two now are kind of associated with the other because they're both using the small media width. All right, so if we were to increase the size of that, we're still in the small. It doesn't change until that 1/68th pixel. So now it jumps down to 6, leaving 3, 6, 3. And for me, that is just a little too large for my taste. So it's more likely, I'm going to go ahead and go back and use a 10 here, and a column, XS, offset, 1. It's more likely, see, I think that looks better. And with the bigger that phones are getting, it's more likely that this is probably the smallest phone you'll get, not this. But even so, it's completely usable. I mean, there's enough space there for most emails. I mean, some people have ridiculously long emails, but you know, whatever. But still, it's still quite usable and quite nice looking, even at the ultimate smallest level of 320 pixels wide, which would be, I don't even know if the very first iPhone was that low resolution. Maybe it was. I don't know. Anyway, so we'll bring it up. This would be more like the modern larger phones or regular phones that are now larger. This would be more like, you know, the XL series phones or the larger versions or plus size. And then that ends up being the size of a tablet. And that's the vertical width, so it looked more like that. And then desktop, now we're getting a little bit too wide. So we've hit our next step. We want to make sure that is, which is going to be our large one, is going to be column LG, let's try 4, and column LG, oh, I'm sorry, not LG, medium. Extra small, small, medium, large. Large is our last one. Medium. So column medium 4, and then column medium 4, oh, excuse me, offset 4. So what we've done is we've compressed it to 4. We're going to put 4 on the back end, front end, 4 on the back end, totaling 12. 4 and 4 and 4. And you can start to see why we use 12 is because it's divisible in so many different ways. There we go. And you saw it change size, and that is a realistic size for a login box. I wish that we had one more between extra small and small, because that's just a little too wide. But we don't have another division. This is all extra small, and then that's small, and that's medium, and then when we go to our large, and then extra large, it's a little wide. I would probably not go any different than that. You could go smaller or change it a little bit, but I don't see any reason in changing its width from there. That's probably perfectly fine on a 1400 pixel monitor. Okay. So I think that we've basically got what we want in size. Okay, so that covers our width, responsive width. Uh, and I think I'm going to end that video right there and make this a two-part video. So we're going to do part 1 and part 2, because all we've really done now is created our component and talked about Bootstrap. We haven't done a lot of Vue. So I'm going to turn this into a two-part. One of them is going to be scaffolding, and one of them then is going to be creating all the functionality within it. Because really all we covered was Bootstrap, and it's over an hour. So I'm going to cut this one here, and we'll add a new one. Talk to you guys shortly.